Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. You know, one of the big debates that was a part of that, I don't know what you want to call it.
I call it the big ugly bill, but you can call it what you want.
The big beautiful bill, because I think they literally named it that. I think it was the big beautiful bill.
Tact.
Ultimately the name of the legislation. But one of the controversial parts, and to be clear, did not make it into the final bill. It was ultimately removed, but it did kick off what I think is a really interesting debate, and I don't think we've heard the last of it because it's been a bone of contention, I think, for quite a while, is how much land the federal government owns. It is an enormous amount of land, especially in western states. And if you look at a map, I don't know how up to date this is, but it's probably pretty close. You know, the federal government owns 85% of the land in Nevada. They own 57% of Utah. They own 50% of Idaho. Now, North Dakota is actually a state where there's not a lot of government land ownership. I think only about 3% of the land in North Dakota is owned by the government. So North Dakota, mostly a private land place. But when Senator Mike Lee from Utah, Republican, came out and he had an amendment where he wanted to basically initiate or authorize a sell-off of some of this land, it got very controversial, and a lot of different groups stepped out, environmental groups, outdoors groups, and everything else. They stepped up and they said, we don't want to do that. So we wanted to have a discussion about that on today's show, and we have John Bradley on. He is the executive director of the Wildlife Federation here in North Dakota. John, how are you?
Good, Rob. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Set this issue up. I mean, obviously a win for you guys in getting that amendment pulled, but you know, I don't think this debate's over by any stretch of the imagination. What's your argument on this?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The fight isn't over. We kind of won this round, but this seems to be an issue that comes up about every 10 years in a real way where, in this big, beautiful bill, if that's what we're going to call it or agree to call it.
It's the official title. I think we all have varying degrees of feelings about that.
I'm good with that. So in the big, beautiful bill, we're, to put it in a football term, about on the, 1 yard line. They were driving. It's 4th and 1. It made it in to the very last second before being pulled. And it took hundreds of thousands of calls from hunters and anglers, hikers, campers, backpackers, bikers, kind of the whole suite. And I'll say North Dakota showed up and they made plenty of phone calls. The West, states like Montana and Idaho, where public lands are a way of life, they called, but also our folks on the East Coast made a ton of phone calls and put a lot of pressure on. And it really comes down to, do you value public lands and this kind of American idea where these lands are for the people? Or, do you have a different mindset that these should be privatized and should be only focused on driving profit? And so that's the real kind of dichotomy between the two that we're seeing play out in real time now.
John, I think the politics around public lands are very, very interesting because it is so nonpartisan. I mean, when I look at my Facebook feed and I have conservative friends in Montana who, man, this is the third rail. You don't touch our public lands over there. Can you talk a little bit about, sportsmen, hunters, anglers, like, why is this so important to them? And you said they raised their voice. How can they raise their voice in a way that maybe it's at the ballot box or something like that? I mean, why is it so important to folks?
Well, I think public lands are a great equalizer in this country. Uh, Whether you have $1 billion or you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have access to these areas. So you can take your kid hunting, you can go camp, you can go fish. It doesn't matter how you vote at the ballot box. These lands belong to all of us. And so I think that's why we see this as such a kind of a nonpartisan issue as it plays out is regardless of where you might view other things, the federal budget otherwise, or, abortion rights issues, the whole host, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these other issues. On the public land side, regardless of income, regardless of background, regardless of how you came into this country, you have access to these lands just as much as I do, just as much as you, Rob, or you, Chad. And so it is a great kind of equalizer. If you've ever been on a backcountry elk hunt, those mountains don't care your financial background. You still have to hike them. You still have to pull that elk out. And that's, I think, a great uniter. We would love to have, public lands be the third rail, where politicians are kind of terrified to go after them. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to that, but we do see it as a third rail issue for us. There's many people in North Dakota who have kind of the mantra of not a single acre. And I think that's a testament to how important these lands are to people.
My family kind of has an interesting story about public lands and federal lands. I was born in Alaska. My grandfather and his friends built a hunting cabin on federal lands way back in the Alphabet Mountains, northwest of Paxton, Alaska. It takes about 15 hours to get back to by track vehicle. Built it back there before Alaska was a state. I don't think a lot of people realize that Alaska was still a U.S. territory when my father was born. But I hunted at that cabin. The federal government just burned it down about 10 years ago because it wasn't supposed to be back there. For years, they had tried to find our cabin and they couldn't find it and burned it down. Ports in Alaska kind of scofflaws. So I have to admit my a little bit of that's my trivial history with this. One thing though that you said, because I say that story partly, I have been a backcountry hunter. I've hunted moose, I've hunted caribou, I've hunted bear. I love these lands. I absolutely want us to have access. But you said something that I object to, and you said it was like a choice between preserving public land or selling it off. Senator Lee's proposal was a very, very small percentage of the total federal lands owned by the federal government. They own an enormous amount of land. Are you saying that I don't think it's a choice between the two. I think we can look at some federal lands and say, maybe we don't need to own this. Maybe this little bit of land is okay. I object, I guess, to it making a choice because I don't think it's that choice. I think we can look at a specific parcel or specific set of acres and say, okay, maybe this one is okay. Are you arguing that there's no acres at the federal land that the federal government owns that might be okay to allow some energy development on or to sell off for private development? Nothing?
No, and I think that's a good clarification, Rob. You seem pretty reasonable in that approach. And in fact, there's law already on the books that allow for those types of sales and transfers. The difference between what we saw in the Big Beautiful Bill versus it's a FLPMA, it's called the Federal Land Policy and Management Act. I have to pull that acronym out. That existing law allows for the process of land swaps, land sales, and land transfers. The key piece in that is those dollars from a land sale, whether it's to a state or to a county or to a private individual, that money has to then go back into kind of that conservation fund that will go and either increase access to other public lands. Maybe it's a corner, kind of checkerboard area where that land could then be kind of consolidated for public land where it would make sense. So that's an existing piece of, I think it was passed in 1976 of legislation. It's already on the books. Senator Mike Lee's proposal would have kind of ignored that existing process and kind of done a wholesale or a larger wholesale approach to selling land. instead of going through that process, which has public input, has kind of the comment period, and the dollars from that would have been generated from Senator Mike Lee's land sale would have gone right back into the general treasury. In a couple of his versions, I think the final version was tweaked a little bit, where it was a percentage would go back to that conservation fund. But there is an existing thing. There are lands that make sense where, if industry needs kind of infrastructure, I think it would be the big one around cities where we see little plots of BLM. So those processes are in place. There is a mindset from a lot of people, particularly in states with North Dakota, that have so few acres of public land, that say we need all the public land we can get. We're okay with swaps and transfers, but that total acreage should remain at whatever the total is. And I don't have that off the top of my head. I think it's a couple million acres here in the state.
So just to be clear about the distinctions between Senator Lee's proposal and the status quo, is Senator Lee's would have directed the revenues away from conservation efforts. And also, I'm assuming his process would have been a lot quicker, a lot faster than maybe less arduous than the existing process.
Yeah. And I won't sit here and say that the current process under FLIPMA, as it's known, is a joy for any of the members, but it is that
federal government, so I imagine it's pretty bureaucratic.
Yeah. Yep, but it's that robust process that actually allows the people to have a say in what happens on the ground.
So, John, bringing it specifically to North Dakota, we don't have that much federal land, but I think there has been issues. You mentioned sort of a checkerboard sort of thing that I think some in the coal industry have been frustrated by in going through that land swap process. Can you talk specifically about North Dakota and where our public lands are? Where is that sort of tension between industry and conservation?
Yeah, so North Dakota has a few different types of public land. We have some BLM acres out west that have some of that kind of energy and coal there. We have our grasslands, the Dakota Prairie grasslands, which is the Little Missouri grasslands and the Cheyenne grasslands on the eastern part of the state. That's managed under the Forest Service. Those, acres, again, you'll see oil and gas development around, particularly if you head up to kind of that McKenzie County, Dunn County areas. You'll see a lot of oil and gas development there. We also have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service acres in the state. Those would be your kind of wildlife refuges. And then to a lesser extent, we have public land on the state level, which would be our, wildlife management areas. So that's kind of the broad makeup. And I'm sure I'm missing a few, like the Corps of Engineers own land along the river or around Lake Sakakawea. But those acres are open to the public. We're allowed to hunt and fish and hike and camp and kind of, target shoot, whatever the suite of kind of that public use mandate is. But those acres also are open to cattle grazing. Grazers will purchase or get a lease for those lands. So that's, again, part of that multiple use. As we know, oil and gas in the state on federal lands has been a thing for, the last 100 years. Now it's in the last probably 30 really taken off in North Dakota. So this public use or multiple use public land mandate allows for all of those things to happen. And there's, tensions here and there, but if we were to sell them off or to make some of those swaps happen or a transfer outright to the state, we would likely see those lands go to, maybe their highest profit use of what they could generate for the state. So you'd see more development, you'd see less opportunities for kind of that outdoor recreation, which is slowly becoming kind of a pretty big economic driver, not only in North Dakota, but across the West.
I wondered, to me, the right approach here always seems balanced, because I want us to be able to use our natural resources. I'm pro oil, pro coal, and we need these resources. But on the other hand, I mean, I also want my kids to be able to hike and my grandkids to be able to hike in a beautiful area or go see these areas and enjoy them and use those resources as well. So it seems like that's the best approach. In North Dakota, a lot of, we had a debate back during the legislative session over a new national monument around the Madahe Trail. And there was a lot of objection immediately from, the energy industry. I think there was some maybe some agriculture interests around the area who really objected to it and said that, we weren't looped in on this. We weren't really told about, what was being planned. And I think that's just, and it makes me think that that's not unlike, Senator Mike Lee's proposal, where he just sort of unilaterally throws this in the pot. It doesn't get groups like yours on board, doesn't do the talking. That to me seems the right. Get everybody in a room and figure out, okay, we've got all these different interests. How do we balance them? That seems to be the right approach.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the difference between those two examples, there was, a call of action for the creation of the Madahe National Monument. There wasn't necessarily like the deadline, or it wasn't wrapped in a bill that was going to have to be passed, right? And so that's kind of the difference. Now we can go and talk to ranchers, we can talk to energy, we can talk to those different groups and say, here are the values that this, the Madahe National Monument was trying to protect. And we can have those conversations over a cup of coffee or a beer, and kind of hash out, and maybe the scope wasn't the right size. I've heard a lot about that for that project. But we can have that dialogue, and I think North Dakotans still can have that conversation. Where on the DC side, Senator Mike Lee's proposal, it wasn't very conversational, right? It was, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm getting a lot of negative feedback from my peers, my other congressmen who are getting pressure. I'm going to just cut out Montana now and then put it in. Instead of actually talking with his local constituents and the people that use these Western public lands.
John, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Yesterday, July 10th, yesterday, the North Dakota Congressional Delegation came out with the Congressional Review Act to repeal BLM's harmful land use plan. Reading the delegation's press release, you'd think Joe Biden single-handedly came out here and determined how to screw over the energy industry. Your organization had a response to that and pointed out that Bureau of Land Management plan is developed by local leaders, and that this bill would essentially scorch earth is the phrase that you guys used to this plan that was put into place. Can you, talk about this, but could you also explain to the listeners, how does a land management plan come together? Again, you'd think your group and the congressional delegation were talking about two completely different processes based on the press releases.
Yeah. And this, when we talked about the bureaucracy of before, resource management plans have a multi-step, multi-year process to put these plans in place. And this isn't, when we think of federal land managers, we think of Washington, D.C. These people live in Dickinson. They live in Watford City. They are the same, they drive F-150s. They root for the Bison during the football season and probably UND hockey in the winter. Like they're North Dakotans. They've given their life to this kind of call of service of land management. And so they're not this kind of boogeyman in DC. They're here on the ground. And so they have to deal with, their local members in Medora, their folks in Dickinson. They're talking with ranchers. They know what is actually happening on the ground. And so through this kind of multi-year process, there's opportunity for public comment. There's opportunity for, they have open houses where I was engaged on not this BLM resource management plan, but the Forest Service travel management, where they had maps all across their room and they had 10 or 15 staff that were willing to talk individually with ranchers. And this is a very similar process that happens with BLM about where roads make sense, where they don't, what are the issues that ranchers, that energy folks are having. And really they try and find that balance. They weigh, hunters' concerns about being able to go, once they draw their mule deer buck tag, that they're able to go and have a good quality hunt. They balance that with the need of oil and gas to be able to safely operate on those roads, and that those roads are in quality shape where they can get to them. So it really is a robust process. There's ample time for public comment, not only from individual members, stakeholders, but also from industry. And so our gripe, and kind of why I call it scorch earth, is using the Congressional Review Act just wipes that entire process and says, no, we're going to start from scratch, and we know better in DC than these local land managers, these who are meeting daily with the people that are actually on the ground.
Well, John, it sounds very similar to what the frustration was with Mike Lee's plan on public lands. I mean, it sounds like the process in place is exactly what Rob was talking about here. Let's bring people together, figure out the best plan. And now, again, we have politicians coming in and saying, we know better.
Well, let me push back on something Chad said. Despite Chad's protestations, there's no question that the National Democratic Party is absolutely hostile to coal development and oil development. I could Google and quickly find, I'm sure, a lengthy list of people like Joe Biden talking about wanting to put the coal industry and the oil industry out of business. So I don't think that being suspect of the Biden administration's use
Rob, I think that's a fair criticism of my comments.
Yeah. I don't think that being suspect of their intentions when they promulgate rules like this is problematic. Now, I'm reading here, this is from Senator Kramer's press release on this, so grain of salt given the source. He's obviously got a perspective here. But he says that the plan prohibits coal leasing on over 4 million acres, or nearly 99% of federal coal acreage. It also blocks 213,000 acres, or 44% of federally owned fluid mineral acreage, to future development. Throughout the drafting process, the state of North Dakota and the congressional delegation expressed opposition to the draft RMP before the BLM finalized it. Can you respond to those objections? Because that really sounds like they're just completely locking down access to these lands. I mean, that seems pretty draconian to me, reading that.
Yeah, it is Kramer's press release, so it is going to have a little bit of that tilt, which rightfully so. Coal plays a huge part of our state. I think our concerns is more about the CRA actual usage. There's still processes in place where, from the top down on BLM, there's resource management plan revisions. That's an existing process that already is on the books, that you could go in and make those tweaks if, a change of administration happens, like we've seen since Biden to Trump, and the priorities have shifted.
By the time we finalize one of these plans, we get a new president in, and they want to just wipe the entire plan out. We do a whole other podcast on the chaotic state. What's the right process? I mean, if not using the Congressional Review Act, what's the right process for this?
I think that the right process is, tweaking, I would say, our existing resource management plan development process, and maybe offering. I come from a balanced approach to these public lands. There's a multiple use mandate, and I think that is what makes public lands as so appealing, and why they are an asset to the American people, and they should be seen as an asset to the federal government, is that there is energy potential, there is outdoor recreation, but to tip the scale one way or the other on it, right, where we're only going to put up conservation values, or we're only going to put up oil and gas profits, I think is the wrong approach. And we do seem to be in kind of that pendulum swing right now between administrations, where one side goes far left, we're going to lock up these lands and they can't be used for anything. And the other goes, we need to develop every single acre while we can.
Do you think I'm talking about that pendulum swing. Do you think the existing plan goes too far?
I personally think the existing plan brings conservation up to an equal footing as coal or oil and gas development, which we haven't seen before. So it is a bit of a shock, but under that kind of multiple use mandate that is given to BLM lands, I think that is a fair piece, and I think it's more reflective of where we are headed. The outdoor economy in the U.S. was, it's over $1 trillion, and public lands are kind of that backbone of it. And so I think we need to start taking it seriously, and not saying it's always going to be there. We don't have to do anything. As long as the lands are there, the money will be there. That's not always the case.
Last question for me, John, unless Chad's got another one, is do you worry sometimes about the politicians, the political class, using these processes to sort of achieve, because it seems like that's kind of what's happening here is we have both sides sort of escalating. The Democrats come in and they don't like oil, they don't like coal, so they're going to use these things to attack those industries. And then Republicans come in and say, okay, well, if you're going to use those tools, then we're going to try to obliterate those tools, so you can't do that anymore. And it maybe I guess from on the outside looking in, perceive you kind of caught in the middle, like, listen, we just want to preserve some of these lands, and do you feel like a football sometimes?
Definitely. And the grade school football that has been left out in the sun and left in the mud, conservation sometimes becomes the dog that everybody can get behind kicking. And I think it's important that North Dakotans particular, but Americans as a whole, I think need to do a better job of speaking out and saying what they want in this process, so that it does become something that a politician can't go one way or the other based off. We don't see that swing. It becomes kind of more steadied out. It's unfortunate that it takes a proposal like Senator Mike Lee's to really rally the troops and I'm glad we were able to, but they should be just as engaged during these resource management plans, during these proposals. They should be hollering right now at their legislature, their congressional delegation about the cuts that we're seeing to the National Park Service, to Forest Service, to USGS. If we don't actually invest in these lands, we are going to see them slowly degrade, and that only feeds and fuels Mike Lee's arguments. And so, if leaving today, if I had one wish, it would be that as many sportsmen and outdoorsmen and hikers and bikers who were willing to call on this one issue, that if they could pick one other issue around public lands and public land management and get engaged, I think we would see some of this kind of the pendulum swinging wouldn't swing as far to either sides, and we'd have it closer to the middle and closer to what the actual American people want on these public lands.
Thanks for your time, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Rob. Really enjoyed it.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name is Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Great interview with John Bradley. And I think that the comments, he said, when he responded to whether or not they kind of feel like a football sometimes, I think is right. I think one of the solutions to this, what's going on with this, I think, is another side effect from the polarization in politics, where Democrats need to elect some people who aren't immediately hostile to oil and gas.
Well,
and
we did in Heidi Heitkamp, and then you and your friends beat her. I mean, what are you going to do?
Okay, she in a lot of ways she got beat because the national Democratic brand, is hostility, and the thing is I mean, how much it's a tough situation. By the way, the other side of it, I also think Republicans need to elect some people who are a little more sympathetic to John Bradley's view on public lands.
Yeah. And I do think, on the Democrat side, I've often said that the fossil fuel industry needs people like Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin, sort of those moderate Republicans that understand fossil fuel a hell of a lot more than just one other Republican in a caucus that, is talking to each other and all agreeing. They need somebody in the Democrat caucus who's explaining this industry to Democrats. And we don't have that right now. The Democrat caucus is lacking that because Heidi and others are gone. I also think having sort of this conversation about the Bureau of Land Management via press release is also not a great way to try to find common ground. I mean, the Kevin Kramer and delegation press release was pretty aggressive. Then John's response to it was pretty aggressive. I'm not sure that helps us get to a balanced approach. And I think from John's perspective, he's like, this last plan finally got us up to par with the energy industry. So that's their perspective on it. And the perspective of the energy industry is this is unfair to them. So it's got to get in a room and figure out if there is common ground.
Well, and Kramer, and again, it's Kramer's press release, but saying that like 99% of the land is just completely locked out to development now, like no matter what sort of accommodations or deals might be made, it's just locked out. Is that the right place? I think some of the, and the problem is everybody's reacting to one another, right? I mean, the Biden administration doesn't like the industry. The delegation loves the industry. And then it's just back and forth, and it becomes everybody's throwing tomatoes at each other, and nobody's really sitting down to like, okay, how can we find something that everybody can live with here?
And we know the delegation likes to look at the past and take shots at Biden so they don't have to defend the current occupant of the White House.
It's good politics.
It is good politics.
But as we know, as we often say, good politics doesn't always lead to good policy. Talking about another situation you and I have been kind of texting about in the background is frozen federal grants. Particularly, and there's all sorts of this going on, but in particular, and I know it hits home for you, given your day job, but the U.S. Office of Management and Budget has withheld, or I don't know if the proper word's frozen. I mean, there's so much going on right now.
Yeah. It's frozen. And Rob, I'd say this hits my day job, but it also hits me as a dad.
Sure.
I mean, so essentially what's happened in Washington is they've frozen a bunch of different title programs, including $25.4 million of money that was supposed to come to North Dakota. That's 15% of the money that comes from the feds to North Dakota for K through 12. The problem, and we've talked a lot about this, the people receiving this money had already been granted this money through congressional action. They were notified on June 30th that they would not be getting the money on July 1st. And we're talking about programs that are before and after school programs for at-risk kids. So it's not just in a school, but it's also, like Girls and Boys Club of Red River. We're talking about programs that help English language learners. We're talking about programs that helps folks with disabilities. And I don't know how a school district or any of these nonprofits are supposed to plan when the rug gets pulled out from them the day before the money is supposed to arrive. I mean, Robin Nelson, who works for the Boys and Girls Club in Red River Valley that provides before and after school program, there's 109 after school programs that serve 7,000 kids and employ more than 565 staff people could be affected by this funding freeze. And maybe the money will still come, but what's the point of this, Rob? What's the point of causing this chaos and doing it in this way? And I will say I'm frustrated. Crickets from the congressional delegation in terms of unfreezing this money. Crickets from the governor's office to unfreeze this money. Crickets from the superintendent of public instruction. And I understand that Kirsten's trying to get a job in Washington, But if our superintendent of public instruction is not screaming and yelling to unfreeze these dollars, I'm not sure she can be doing her job if she's not doing that because she's waiting for Washington to finish her appointment. Nothing from the legislature who's going to have to fill this gap if this money doesn't come. I'm frustrated that, frankly, the people we elect to stand up for our kids aren't doing it. And this is money that's been appropriated. This is not like new. This is not a conversation about should this be done or should it not be done. This is money that's been appropriated that they're not sending. It's our money.
That's the point I wanted to make about this, is that there's two separate debates to be having here. One is, should we be spending this money? Is this the right budget line item in the context of $37 trillion national debt, annual federal budget deficits over $1 trillion? Are these cuts that need to be made? That's one debate. A separate debate is, this is money, as you've said repeatedly, that has already been appropriated. It's already been planned for by all these local programs that are used by thousands and thousands of North Dakotans. And now it's just gone. And that doesn't seem like the right way to do business. I mean, to me, that's
we don't know if it's gone. It might come at some point. We don't know when it's going to come. I mean, I don't know how you do business.
It's gone for now. It's gone for now. And there's a constitutional question. Can the president of the United States just refuse to spend money that Congress has appropriated?
Well, and I would challenge the Attorney General. I mean, Drew Wrigley has been fond of signing on to lawsuits against the federal government to do things against Biden's administration. Again, this is money meant for North Dakota kids. If Drew wants to sign on to a lawsuit or lead on a lawsuit, sue and get this money unfrozen and get it into the hands of the people who are doing right by North Dakota kids. We're talking about poor children who need before and after school care. How can we? And then Robin Nelson also points out we've got a child care crisis. This makes it even worse.
I was going to make that point. Now, my son is no longer in the program because he's old enough now to come home and be on his own for a little while. But we used, it's called the CLC program here in Minot. It's administered through Minot Public Schools. And it would allow, when Cooper was using it, it would allow us to drop him off early in the morning before school. He'd get breakfast. He could play for a little while. They did some activities. He'd go to school. And then after school until about 5 p.m., when, we were kind of done with the work day and able to pick him up again. He had after school activities. He played with all his friends. It was a great program. We paid some money out of pocket, but not enough. It was
minimal compared to childcare, right? I mean, I think we pay $130 a month for before and after at Evans School.
Yeah, and they ran it in the summer too, which was an all day program. So it was, it's a really good program, and a lot of people depend on that for childcare. I in a perfect world, we get to a point where childcare was a service that could be delivered affordably without the need to government subsidize it. But we don't live in that world right now. And the lack of access to it's holding us back as a state as we try to fill jobs in the workforce. It's holding us back, economically. It's a real hardship. So,
and I don't know what is accomplished by this. It causes chaos, unnecessary chaos. Again, money that's already been appropriated. Our congressional delegation should be pounding on the door of OMB and the Department of Education and say, send this money to our kids in North Dakota. But everybody's afraid of Trump. Everybody's afraid of Trump and to stand up for our kids because they don't know what's going to happen. And frankly, we elect our congressional delegation to do this, to go and get this money for North Dakota.
Now, shifting to the other side of the debate, this is nationally, it's $6.8 billion. That's a big chunk of change, even in the federal budget. You consider, even if our annual budget deficit's $1 trillion, that's 1,000 billions. This is 6.8 of those. That adds up, right? A few billion here, a few billion there. Pretty soon it's real money. So there is an argument to be made, but I guess the problem I have is doing it. The bigger problem I have is doing it this quickly and not giving states time to step in and to say, and I mean, you went down a litany of state officials that should at least at this point be talking about it. Say
something.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, it would have been better if we are going to cut this. And again, we don't know if it's going to be cut or not. I mean, that's the problem. What are your plans for this? I don't think that I am sympathetic to the frustration that we have had debt and deficit problems from Republican governments to Democratic governments year after year, and nothing's getting done about it. I am sympathetic to the idea that we have got to get aggressive, but that is not, I think, license for government through chaos, which is what we're getting right now.
Well, and I struggle with this conversation around debt and deficit right now, because we just passed this big bill that's adding to the deficit. And the other thing that I'm frustrated by is we're not talking about the downhill effects of this. I mean, there was an article in the Bismarck Tribune that the Legislative Council has estimated the House version of the big, beautiful bill would cost the state $1.42 billion in Medicaid funding over the next 10 years. And the Senate version cut more. Where's the legislative leaders talking about the fact that we're going to lose $250 to $300 million a year in funding? And if we don't replace that, 19,000 people lose their health insurance. So a lot of this stuff is rolling downhill. And I don't want to wait until January of 2027 to hear the legislators say, oh my God, we don't have any money. They need to be talking about this, what we're going to do right now, because the same thing with SNAP. I mean, a lot of the stuff is coming down to states to pay. So maybe we're cutting spending at the federal level.
Yeah.
But it's all part of a bigger ecosystem, right? That we're all going to have to do for anyway.
I agree with you that we should be talking about it. I think the answers to some of these questions you may not be happy about is maybe we don't replace the funding. You know, maybe these programs, SNAP has been expanded, Medicaid has been expanded. If we're running, again, massive federal deficits, maybe we just can't cover all the people that these programs have been covering. And I think you and I can both probably say there are probably some people on Medicaid that don't need to be there. There's probably some people in SNAP that don't need to be there. And I am all for efforts to focus these programs on true needs. I know Congresswoman Fedorchak's talked a lot about disabled people, impoverished people, elderly people. That's who Medicaid is supposed to serve. So if we're really narrowing the program to that, I'm in favor of that.
But then
I don't want government by chaos.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page on the chaos thing. And now we can go into the Medicaid stuff a little bit. You know, my concern is if we kick these 19,000 people off of Medicaid in North Dakota, one of the reasons why we do Medicaid expansion is to give health insurance to people who maybe don't have health insurance otherwise, and they're often healthy young, right? And we need them to be part of the pool to bring down health insurance costs. We need that hospitals are still giving them care. Somebody's got to pay for that. So part of the goal of getting more people in Medicaid was to bring down the costs on everybody else and then make sure that our hospitals are reimbursed, right? So if we're going to have this conversation about not covering those 19,000 people, we also have to have that conversation about your health insurance rates are going to go up and rural hospitals are going to be hurt very badly by that. I mean, it's right. I mean, this is the conversation. It's not just let's throw the 19,000 people off because we can't afford it. There are ramifications of these down the stream.
They're hard conversations. And the thing about it is some people, and you know, this will be a great line that if I was running for office, somebody could put in a television ad or something, but there may need to be some pain in this because again, where's the pain if we get to a point where our federal government, just the interest payments on our national debt is something that we can't afford.
But Rob, I struggle with passing a bill that potentially kicks 19,000 people off of their health insurance in North Dakota and also increases the deficit, right? I mean, so we're causing double pain. We're increasing the deficit while also hurting people on the other end. That's stupid policy.
You're asking me to defend the big, beautiful bill. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't want you to defend it, but I do think it's a conversation that we have to have because right now we see our delegation out in the state, you know, trying to defend this and saying how great it is. I saw on Facebook alone, the ARC of North Dakota put out a statement with a whole list of things that are going to affect people's disabilities. The Turtle Mountain Tribe just put out a statement, the whole list of things that's going to affect Native people, right? And so we need to be having these conversations about the effects of this beyond just the tax cuts good. It's good for the fossil fuel industry, so therefore we should be happy with this. The delegation needs to come out and talk about this whole bill, not just the things that they like.
They are being a little tone deaf, and also the energy industry being so visible on this. I again support oil, I support coal, but they need to be cognizant of the fact that if there could be backlash against them from the public if it's like they're standing next to the delegation at the press conference saying, look at all the good stuff we got out of this bill. This is great for us and great for North Dakota. And I don't necessarily even disagree with that. But if you're saying that and it's juxtaposed to, hey, your after school program is closed now. So it was great for Ron Ness and the Petroleum Council, but not so great for Joe Sixpack, who now has to figure out childcare. That's bad politics. Although, I mean, speaking of, we need to feel some pain. We also need to remember Trump campaigned on this stuff. They weren't ambiguous about this, and Americans voted for it.
So Kevin Kramer has talked about this education freeze as being what people
Not
voted.
the education freeze specific.
No, but he said that. He said North Dakota, like, we voted for taking education out of the feds and giving it to the states. And that's what he said about this in one of the articles. But that's not what this is doing. This is taking the state's money and having the feds decide how we should spend it or not spend it at all. So if you think the states are the right ones to do it, give the states the money and let them spend the money. I mean, it doesn't make any, again, I know we're on the same page. The chaos part of this, we can have a discussion if these are good programs or bad programs, but you can't pull the rug out a day before the money is supposed to come and say, figure it out, schools. Yeah. Figure it out, parents, right? Parents are going to be the ones that ultimately have to deal with this, and the kids are going to be the ones that are hurt.
One of the frustrating things about these debates is, like, we end up arguing the status quo versus a proposal.
Absolutism.
And it just becomes so difficult because again, people are going to have to we are not going to fix the national debt problem, but if we don't crack some eggs, right? So people are going to have to feel some pain. We have been dissolute in the past. We have been profligate. And now, it's time to pay the piper. And I'm, I am for some pain. I would like to pay some pain now so that my grandkids don't have to deal with it. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And I say that, I mean, Robin Nelson and the Boys and Girls Club is one example. They're one of the groups that are hit by this. You mentioned them. I know Robin Nelson. She does great work. Her group does great work. I am completely sympathetic. And I just mentioned, my family has used one of these after-school programs in the past.
And I would imagine a lot of parents have used these after-school and might not even realize where the funding comes from.
Yeah. I think the problem is we have these debates, and the lens the public sees it through is anybody objecting to the plan are just Democrats trying to beat Republicans. Yep. Or any Republicans defending it are just Republicans who want to stop Democrats. And at some point we have to think, no, these programs serve real people. Right. And we're all obliged, everybody in elected office, everybody who participates in these debates, even you and I, owe it to be doing the best for the public. And on both ends of the ledger, in making sure our budget's balanced and we're spending responsibly, but also that we're providing needed services and we're not governing through chaos.
And Rob, we've talked a lot about, this national debt, and I'm shocked at how little people talk about the national debt now compared to even 20 years ago. It's like people just throwing up their hands. But we're not going to solve this problem by cutting taxes and cutting programs, right? It has to be both sides. We have to look at revenue increase and I think people on my side need to be a little bit more open to sitting down at a table and figure out where there is some places to save. Because you're right, these conversations about after-school programs are not black and white. These conversations about public lands, as you've pointed out often, not all public lands is the same. We don't want to sell Yellowstone, but are there plots of lands where we could sell stuff? Like, can we have these conversations? And we're not living in a world where we can have nuanced conversations. They pull the funding out. We want to sell all public lands. It's very difficult. And I worry part of it is Trump's just power over anybody who's a Republican in the state. Like, I think we used to have a time where people would stand up to the president of both parties.
Well, also, Trump's power over Democrats in a different way too, because he is consistently kicking their asses over and over again. So it's Republicans who, I mean, you imagine, why aren't Republicans standing up to Trump? Well, look what he does to Democrats. Think what he can do to members of his own party. Yeah. Nobody wants to stand up to this guy. And the thing is where does his power come from? The people, ultimately, who elected him. He got more than 2 million more votes than Kamala Harris did in the election. So,
and Rob, let's not forget a lot of the people when we talk about Medicaid cuts, when we talk about these after-school programs that are being hurt by these cuts, absolutely people who voted for Donald Trump, right? I mean, if you're in a state that went 65 or 70% for Trump, there's a chance that a big chunk of these people voted for Trump.
But they may not blame Trump for it.
Absolutely. There's a complete... And it goes to your earlier point. I mean, I get criticized sometimes, and I'm sure I know you get criticized. You say anything about Trump's policy, it's because you hate Trump. It's like, no, I don't hate Trump. I hate the fact that Robin Nelson's trying to do after school care and Trump just pulled the money out from her. That's what I hate.
It is frustrating. And the thing is, it's everywhere. I mean, I look at the stories I've been writing about the mayoral race the last couple of weeks. And it is amazing the number of people who see the problem, not that a mayoral candidate has a misdemeanor on his record related to domestic violence from, I think it was 2009. It's he's a victim because I reported that. Yeah. Is the feeling and that ability of the people falling for the political classes spin and everything. The
acceptableness of being the victim when you've screwed up in today's society is unbelievable. Mr. Fuller is not the victim in this. Well, he's not the victim in this.
He's campaigning on transparency and accountability. Well, what being accountable looks like is when you did something wrong, and he pleaded guilty to this. This isn't like some unsubstantiated charge. He pleaded guilty in a court of law to this. You're accountable by saying, yeah, I did that. And I'm sorry. I got a DUI once upon a time, years ago.
Me too.
I'm accountable for that. I did it. It's a terrible mistake. I don't have anybody to blame for that but myself.
Yep.
I get my fines. I took my lumps. And that is what it is. It sucks. But I did it. And it's but if somebody else talks about it or whatever, hey, it's in the public record. I talked about it. That's what being accountable is.
Yeah. And speaking of being accountable, the billboard you shared on Facebook from the Minot Mayor's race that says vote for one of these two that's not a criminal or doesn't have a criminal record or whatever.
Without a criminal record is what it says.
I thought it was funny.
That was something else. I didn't. What the interesting thing is nobody, the Minot Daily, nobody in the other Minot media has reported a thing about any of that.
And that's crazy, particularly since you're printed in a Fargo publication, right? I mean,
I live in Minot, but it's I don't know what to say about that. That's also frustrating in its own way. Little bit of a kerfuffle between the Attorney General and the Ethics Commission right now. And that situation is, I have a column actually I was working on before the show. I'm sure it'll publish sometime after this podcast goes up. Essentially the situation is that the Ethics Commission ruled late last month that Jason Doctor had violated ethics laws with his lease deal with the state. And when that opinion finding came out, I laughed out loud because, first of all, it's the first finding that the Ethics Commission has published. They've been in existence for 5 years and 9 months now. They're issuing an ethics that Jason Doctor violated. He's been convicted of a crime for that situation for more than a year. He was convicted in May of 2024. Right. So it was just absurd. Like, thanks, Ethics Commission. That's super helpful now. But they're also ancillary to that. They've released some documents accusing Attorney General Drew Wrigley of being not cooperative during their investigation of that matter. Now, I think that has less to do with the desire by Wrigley to cover up for Jason Doctor, because I would point out he was the first one to blow the whistle on the lease deal. I think it probably has to do with the Attorney General being very suspect of the Ethics Commission's authority in some of these areas. And I think he's got some good legal arguments to make. For instance, he argues that they don't have the authority to levy fines. They had a draft rule to levy fines. He says that they don't have that authorization anywhere in the law. He's pointed out, and one thing, if we want to talk about the doctor situation specifically, Rebecca Binstock, the executive director of the Ethics Commission, testified at Doctor's trial. And the thing she testified to is that she gave him legal advice about his vote, and then turned around and presided over the ethics process that found that he violated the ethics law. How can you be somebody to give him legal advice and also preside the process that finds he violated the ethics law?
Rob, you remember during the session, the Ethics Commission wanted the ability to answer questions before something happens to avoid ethical violations, and the legislature said no. The Ethics Commission has tried to get authorization to focus more on education and less on this. The legislature said no. So we could be critical of the Ethics Commission, but they only have the permission to do what they want to do. I will say one thing on Drew Wrigley's letter. Drew, you can at some point not respond in such an aggressive way. I mean, like, I've never seen a guy who punches down as much as Drew Wrigley does. I mean, you're the Attorney General, man.
He's got the volume turned up to 11 all the time.
All the time.
Sometimes it can be turned up to like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not even necessarily saying he's wrong. And you make good points. I mean, you didn't let me complain. Not that you. I mean, the Ethics Commission has complaints too. They can rightfully, if we want to talk about the delay it took in getting the doctor thing out, they have 3 staff. They can rightfully say they don't have the resources to be doing the job the way they're supposed to doing it. That's on the legislature. I've argued before that the Ethics Commission probably has grounds to sue the legislature on multiple fronts for violating the Constitution. It is a very frustrating situation because I think I don't support ethics commissions. I don't think this model works particularly well. I think our federal government and our various state governments are littered with ethics commissions that accomplish very little. I think the doctor situation illustrates it. That was something that the news media had more to do with that. The criminal justice system adjudicated that before the Ethics Commission ever got anything out in the public about it. I think the best ethics commission is not one that is out, rooting around and trying to ring up fines and stuff like that, but just exposes things to public scrutiny. Just put things out get things out in the record, put good reports out that inform the public about the things that are happening, and then let the voters decide.
Yeah, but the voters did decide that they wanted an ethics commission.
Yeah.
And we have a legislature who has completely given them no ability to do the job they're supposed to, and then bitches that they're not competent at doing their job, or the attorney general's complaining they're not competent to do their job. Like it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They completely neuter the ethics commission. Look, it's sort of like the Grover Norquist. I want to make government so small that it fails. That's what I feel like they're doing with the ethics commission. They just want to make it so they can't do their job.
I think there's validity in that argument. I think there's also validity in the argument that the Ethics Commission, I think from its founding, and I remember some of the early meetings. I mean, Ellen Chafee, who is a rabid partisan, the ethics commissioners would be like getting texts from her during the meeting with her like kind of directing the meeting.
That's dumb.
I think bad. I think a lot of the suspicion comes from that. So, by the way, in the context of all this, Governor Armstrong is going to have the opportunity to appoint multiple new members for the Ethics Commission. It's going to be really interesting to see who he chooses.
Yeah, because I think they're accepting applicants. I hope he gets a bunch of names to choose from.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I hope we get some people, because the thing is, I think the Ethics Commission is going to work best if we can get past some of the acrimony. The legislature's got to step up. They got to give them the resources. And the legislature needs to be accountable. I mean, this stuff where they're exempting themselves from reporting campaign finances and stuff like that is ridiculous. Trying to give themselves some immunities. The one that Governor Armstrong didn't veto, I think, is appropriate. The one that he did veto, I think, was ridiculous. But I mean, listen, it's got to happen, because you're right. The voters spoke. Now, I maintain that the amendment was poorly worded. I don't think many voters sat down and really read through the whole thing. I think they voted for the concept of an ethics commission. I think we need to be open to the idea that amendment probably needs some reforms. Although the politics of doing that, if the legislature tries to initiate, they're going to get pounded into the dirt.
Especially when the North Dakota legislature does. I mean, part of the deal here is we've had a system in place for a long time in terms of how lobbyists lobby. how legislators fund their campaigns and all those kind of things. There's more to this ethics commission than just the ethics commission. There's a lot of rules that changed in that initiated measure process that I think that people are still frustrated by, because I know that there's a lot of lobbyists who are like, what do you mean we can't do dinners for all legislators anymore? That's the way we've done business. And there's been some cracking down on that kind of thing. So I think there's animosity towards the ethics commission for implementing what the people voted for as well. So we need to figure out, exactly to your point, what's that? How can we make this function properly? The legislature clearly thinks the ethics commission is nothing but a gotcha game. Which there might be some of them that are but the Jason Doctor thing took too long. Should have given them resources, but that wasn't a gotcha game. That the criminal courts agree.
Get it? Yeah. By the way, I also was supposed to testify at that trial. Thankfully, I didn't have to. But our podcast, Jason Doctor's interview on this podcast with you and I was a part of that trial. So obviously,
I'm pretty sure Jason Doctor's attorney wishes he hadn't come on the podcast to talk about it with us.
I can assure you that is correct. Anyway, it's an unfortunate situation, and I think we need cooler heads all the way around. Drew Wrigley, as intemperate as he is prone to being, brings up some valid points. I don't think the Ethics Commission has the authority. I don't think they are not a legislature unto themselves. They have the authority that is spelled out in the Constitution and that is spelled out in statute. And nowhere in there does it say that they can levy fines. So they can't just accumulate to themselves that authority. The legislature has to give it to them. And maybe the legislature should give it to them. But the law is the law, and they're not above.
But we know the problem with Drew's tactics is he went after a person by name in his letter. He went after Rebecca Binstock by name, to the point where Ward Kozer, the former Williston mayor, who's the acting chair, basically said, we're not going to put up with somebody attacking our staff like this. There has to be a way where Drew can communicate this.
Well, in the letter he wrote, dated July 3rd. So it's a letter specifically responding to what was put out by the Ethics Commission in the context of the Jason Douglas findings, where they were saying that he kind of obstructed. It says this is from his concluding paragraph. He writes, and I'm going to have the full letter in my column when it goes up. He writes, Ms. Binstock, your report is replete with misleading narratives and omissions, and officials and the public are left having to guess whether your actions are the result of carelessness or the intentional politicization of your office, either of which is a disservice to the interests and citizens of North Dakota. A full accounting of your report's many misrepresentations and legal errors would unnecessarily belabor the point. It is clear you are frustrated that this office has repeatedly advised and testified on the limits of your authority as of my mandate to uphold the Constitution and laws of North Dakota. In order to serve the interests of the public, I sincerely hope you begin to set aside your evident bias and resort to the objectivity the public must be able to expect from its Ethics Commission staff. I think that there is a small grain of truth in that. I think the Ethics Commission probably is frustrated with Wrigley, questioning some of the limits of their authority, but he went nuclear. Like, he emptied the side.
Your evident bias. Is the bias that they disagree with him? Because it's okay to disagree with each other.
Yeah.
Right? Is the bias that most of their complaints are against Republicans? Well, 90% of the elected officials in North Dakota are Republicans. The vast majority are going to be against Republicans.
We don't know who most of the complaints are really. Other than the few that people have announced for, sort of agendas of their own.
Which also doesn't help the Ethics Commission at all.
No. By the way, I made the editorial decision to stop reporting on them. When people tell me that, I filed an ethics complaint, anybody could file an ethics complaint.
Right. Doesn't mean anything.
So I don't know. It's not a great situation, and I hope cooler heads prevail, but the Ethics Commission also kind of calling out the AG and I don't know that their criticisms of him delaying things on Doctor were all that valid. The records they were requesting were tied up in the Holmberg investigation. That could be frustrating, but the Ethics Commission doesn't have subpoena power. They don't have any more access to records than you or I do.
It also feels a little bit like this, fight by press release we referenced earlier. A letter going one way making accusations, a letter going the other way making accusations. I do worry about the future of the Ethics Commission, though. I mean, who wants that job, right? Who's going to want to be the executive director of the Ethics Commission?
I worry that the only people in there, I worry that it would, by fighting these fights the way we're fighting them, the Ethics Commission is going to turn into an aggressive, I'm trying to search for the right word, but something who's out to like settle scores or settle vendetta. Right. I don't want that.
Yeah.
I want process for accountability and transparency, and that's it.
Yeah, and I would say the ethics board, I mean, I know several of the people, they're really good, sort of stable, like nonpartisan sort of Board Kozer, Murray Sagsby. There's some really, and so it feels strange that there's these fights going on. But I mean,
I think even good people put in a context where it becomes a food fight, and then they feel like they have to. Well, they're throwing tomatoes at us. We got to throw tomatoes back.
Well, and Kozer in his comments clearly felt like he had to stand up for the executive director based on how aggressive they were. I mean, I will say I like Rebecca Binstock. I think she's trying her best to do that. We've had her on the show before. She's extremely competent. I just don't know.
Always been very responsive to my inquiries. I don't have a lot of complaints. I just think it's a situation where people have got to stop, like get your backs down,
right?
Quit exchanging fire. Even Ward Kozer, like maybe the proper response wasn't to fire back at the Attorney General. Maybe the proper response was to have a meeting with the Attorney General and say, "Listen, let's iron out some differences here. What can we do?
Let's figure it out." Yeah. I think as long as we have the ethics commissions on the books, and I actually support, you didn't support, we need to use it right. I mean, I
didn't support it, but it's the law now.
Right.
And I am fully in favor of following the law.
Yeah. All right.
That's it. I don't think we have anybody booked for next week yet, but we'll book somebody eventually.
I'm sure we will. And hey, congressional delegation, unfreeze the money.
Yeah.
Unfreeze the money, bring it home.
Or at the very least, tell us what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Although the congressional, it's not like it's their decision. It's the Trump administration.
They can put some pressure.
They can. Use your bully pulpit.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. As always, certainly appreciate it. You'll hear the number, call, leave us text messages, leave us voicemails if you want to participate in the show. Always appreciate that. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Ports in Alaska kind of scofflaws.